Hello and welcome back, and thanks for watching. Recently I've been asked by many people about alternatives to Lightroom and Photoshop, and in particular these people are objecting to paying a month-by-month subscription for software that they may only use occasionally. So in the next few videos we're going to take a look at some alternatives to these programs to see whether they're a viable option or not. And some of these programs are free and others you need to pay for, but you buy and you own the software. So in this video we're going to take a look at DxO Photolab 9 and see how that performs. So let's jump in and take a look. So when we're talking about alternatives to Lightroom and Photoshop, we're talking about a number of different things. But the main concern that people seem to express is that they're not happy paying a subscription fee on an annual basis for software that they may or may not use all the time. And of course, over the years that we've been paying subscriptions, the fees have gone up, and now with the ever-increasing reliance on AI features, we're finding that now if you want to use some of those features in Photoshop or Lightroom, you're starting to use up credits, which means that you may in fact have to pay a higher fee to continue using the software. So for a lot of people, I know that a lot of people are put off by working with Photoshop because it's a fairly daunting program to learn. It's a legacy-based program, which means that the design of the software is a bit old school and takes a fair bit of learning to get to grips with. But of course it does have non-destructive layer-based editing, which is the gold standard for image processing. But for many people, just working with Lightroom, that's all they ever want and that's all they ever need. So having to pay a fee that gives you both Lightroom and Photoshop isn't necessarily an advantage to them because they're only ever going to use one of those packages. So along come alternative software packages, and in this case we're going to be looking at DxO Photolab, and this is a paid-for piece of software. You pay once for it and you own it, and it's not an expensive piece of software. We'll discuss that at the end of the video, but we'll go through now and have a look at the features and discuss what it does do and what it doesn't do. So DxO Photolab, what does it do? What doesn't it do? Well, when we open the interface, we have two main areas that we can work with. Firstly, the photo library, and secondly, the customize area, which is where we do our raw processing. So essentially, Photolab is for people that would use Lightroom to do their image sorting, processing and so forth, and then outputting into a various different formats. It doesn't do layer-based editing, but it does have very sophisticated masking and retouch tools, and we'll cover those in a minute. But certainly just looking at the photo library area, it has an area that is a file browser where you can look through your various folders, and of course if you're not using Lightroom, then it's really important that when you download your photographs and save them on your computer, that you do use some sort of a system and not just dump them all into the one area, because you'll never find anything that way. And what I do and what a lot of people do is put each photo shoot into a different folder, all within one master folder that contains all of your photographs. So you've got the option there of browsing through your photographs, and we're looking currently at some photos from Iceland. In the middle here we have a preview window with a split screen which shows you before and after where an image has been processed, and we have down the bottom here some thumbnails. And if we wanted to see more of the thumbnails, we can just drag this panel up. It reduces the size of our preview panel, but then we can browse through our photographs and look at the thumbnails of all the raw files. And because I've used Lightroom in establishing my catalog, you'll see here that it's reading the XMP data from the Lightroom file, so that any star ratings are included in this. But if you're not using Lightroom, you're not going to obviously have access to that. And on the right hand side you have all of the metadata associated with the file, and again anything that I've created in Lightroom has been written to a separate file, and that is being read also by this program. So again, if you're not using Lightroom, you won't see the star ratings, you'll just see the file name and so forth. So it's fairly comprehensive. And what you can do is, as you've gone through looking through your photographs, you can put them, a selection of them, into what's called projects, which is down here. And I've created a folder here with just some photographs from Iceland that I might want to work on. So, for instance, this particular image is way down here somewhere, and I could then just click and drag on that and put it into this project, so that I've now got extra photographs, and so you can just go straight to that and see the particular photographs you've selected for your library collection or project collection. So it does have that aspect to it, which is a little bit like the collections in Lightroom, but that's about as far as it goes. But for many people, that will be perfectly good enough. And before we move into the processing aspect of DxO Photolab, let's just quickly look at some of our options here with the view in the center panel. Now, this has obviously been processed in Lightroom or previously processed in DxO. So you've got this split screen option, or you can just refer to the image as it is processed now. I prefer the split screen option because I can see exactly the before and after. We have some other tools here, and of course we have this panel down the bottom that we can enlarge as we see fit, and of course you can zoom all the way in. Now, if I was to pick an image that has had no processing whatsoever on it at this point, and I have the split screen view, well, there's this one must have had a little bit of processing as well. But normally, if there's no processing applied to the image, you won't see any difference on the split screen view. And of course, you can zoom in to 100% and have a look at the fine details. And this is really important when it comes to looking at things like denoising and sharpening the file. And also from within this photo library panel, and you'll see it in the processing panel, we've got quick links here. We can take the image directly into the Nick collection for application of some filters and effects, or we can just simply export the file. Now, in this case, there's not really been much processing applied, but we can export it into a number of different formats. Obviously, you've got the TIFF, JPEG, or a DNG, and then under each of these file formats, you've got various options for quality, bit depth, etc. So it's fairly comprehensive, so that once you've processed your image, you can export it for use elsewhere, and this is quite effective. But the main thing is that we can go now into the customize section and do some image processing. So we'll go back to this image that we've previously looked at, and you'll see that once I move that across, it takes a few seconds to really update the preview, but again, you'll see quite effectively what can be done. So once we've finished working with the file, selecting the ones we want to edit, maybe putting them into a project, we can move into the customize section, which again is a little bit like Lightroom in that you have the three panels with the film strip at the bottom. On the left hand side, we now have the location of the file, we have a histogram, we have all the metadata, and there's a history section here of all of the steps that have been undertaken since the image was processed. So you can see that there's quite a lot of experimentation I've been carrying out on this particular image. We have our preview, again with the split screen if you so desire, and on the right hand side we have all of the tools that we would use in the image processing area. So let's just zoom in for the moment, and let's just make it 100% so that we can see what the difference is between the unprocessed and the processed file. You can see here that on the left, obviously there's a bit of an exposure difference, but certainly the sharpness on the foliage here and some of the other details here is a little bit lacking. This one has had applied the standard DxO processing, and we can see a substantial difference to the sharpness and the denoising. And so one of the key features of this program is that it uses all of the raw processing power of DxO Pure Raw, and together with some further features that such as the selective adjustments and so on. So we've got here exposure, lighting, what they call clear view, which is a little bit like clarity, contrast, micro contrast, which is like texture. We've got tone curves, we've got vignetting controls and so on. So that's under the lighting section. We can look at the color section where we're looking at the type of color space. We've got temperature and tint. All of these are very familiar to people working with Lightroom. And you've got HSL controls and so forth. And once we move into the other area, which is the detail section, this is where we can choose from the 3 different DxO modules, and normally I would use the Deep Prime XD3 module. We can adjust the amount of denoising here. We can look at the lens sharpness optimization, which is another key feature of DxO products, is that they have their own custom lens correction tools, removing chromatic aberration and unsharp masking and so on, so that you can really see if we zoomed into, well, 300%, that's a little bit excessive, but looking at the detail and the way that it extracts the detail from the photograph, this was a lot of spray in the back of the photograph that might look like noise to another program, but here it's actually kept it as that softness in the image, but it has sharpened up the rest of it very effectively. So there's the basic tools. We can then go into things like geometry correction, cropping, distortion correction. Now, I've turned on the automatic correction, which is using the DxO module for this particular camera and lens combination. And you can also do some perspective control. So there's a lot of comprehensive tools here. And then finally, you get into the special effects area. And of course, you've also got your masking tools, and you've got all of these different controls with your masking tools. You've got selective masking. But one of the key features of this program is that you've got access to the U-point technology, which is part of the Nik collection, which has been around for probably over 20 years, that allows you to use the tool, which we call the control point, drop it on an image somewhere, drag the circle out, and it creates a selection on the fly. And this is a very powerful set of tools. There are ways that you can use this to add to other selections, deduct from selections, and even interact or coincide with other selections. So you've got quite a lot of comprehensive tools. You've got a selection, and then you can go and make adjustments based on that. I'm just going to delete that because I don't particularly want that. But you've got a range of tools here that are quite comprehensive, and you can see here I've been experimenting with selecting different areas. Now these are automatic selections that work quite effectively, and the sky selection works particularly well. So as a set of tools, it's quite comprehensive. And then if we wanted to, let's just say we wanted to go to the Nik collection, we've got direct access to all of those options there, and we can then go into the export options and see how we want to process that. And of course, we can export it to disk or to anywhere else that we want to send it. So as a set of tools, it's quite comprehensive. There is a learning curve associated with working with the selection tools, but they do in fact work quite well. But of course, we don't have access to layer-based editing, which is really the only thing that we don't do. And if you're happy with working with selective adjustments with something like Lightroom, this is a very good alternative. So let's talk about the pricing. So we've seen the power of the tools available in DxO Photolab. We've got the different view options, we've got the processing, we've got the selective adjustments. What are the pluses and minuses with this program? Well, firstly, a big plus is that it's a paid for, buy it once and own it model, so that you can work with this program forever. If you choose not to upgrade, you can keep working with this program. It doesn't use layers, which is a bit of a disadvantage, but as we've seen, with a lot of selective adjustments, you can do a lot with the program that doesn't necessarily require us to go into something like Photoshop. And of course, it has slightly simpler controls than some of the other packages, but they all work quite effectively. And it's excellent for raw processing because it does have the power of the pure raw modules and the denoising and the lens corrections, which I think are amongst the best around, if not the best. And certainly when it comes to images that are shot at high ISO and maybe that are not quite ideally focused, it does do a very good job in correcting those things. And in particular, I found it very effective where you had low light and high ISO. It's probably the best around for processing those images. And of course, it integrates with Nik. And the things that maybe are not as ideal with the program, well, the photo organization tools. I mean, Lightroom has still got the best catalog system around. And at least with this, we have our projects option. We can put things together into a project and work on them. That's at least one step above just a file browser. So that's a positive. And well, there's one other thing that I would like to see in improving this, and that is that when we get into the customized panel, I would like to see this panel being able to be extended so that we've got a little bit more flexibility in these sliders, because as we've used in Lightroom over the years, they have the option of making this panel much wider so that you've got much more fine control over the various sliders, although of course you can adjust them with the plus and minus arrows, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But overall it works pretty well. And file formats that it supports, well, of course it supports all of your native RAW files. It will export into TIFF and JPEG and other formats. If we just look at this and let's say we want to export to disk, we've had these couple of standard options. If we wanted to add a new option, we can start to then change the formats. We can go to different JPEG options, DNG, you can compress it or not. And so we've got quite a few ways that we can customize the way the program works. And it comes down to then, well, what does it cost? Well, if you were to buy this directly from DxO now, as a new user, you would pay in Australian dollars $240. Or if you have a previous version of the software, you would only pay around 120 Australian dollars for the upgrade. So it's not an expensive program, but if you were to use the discount code that comes from Photo Tutor, you can get a 15% discount, which brings the price down to a new version to around $204. Now, in comparing that to what you might pay for subscription to Adobe, let's say on their photography plan, if you're a new user, you'd be paying $31 Australian per month, which works out to about $372 a year. So, and then of course you have to pay that again the following year. And if you're on the old Adobe subscription plan, it is quite a bit cheaper, but it still works out to around $190 to $200 a year. So you can buy and own the package for the price that you would pay for 1 year's subscription. So that makes it a fairly attractive option. It may not be for everyone, but I think for what it does, for the price, it does a very good job. And so if you're not interested in working with Photoshop and you really want to work with processing your images and improving them, this is a very good alternative. So I hope that's been useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.